The rain poured relentlessly over the city, blurring streetlights into golden smears across the wet asphalt. It was nearly midnight when Elena, a young nurse with tired eyes and an even more tired heart, hurried through the sliding doors of the hospital. Her shift was supposed to have ended an hour ago, but emergencies never looked at the clock. Just as she reached for her umbrella, she noticed a figure collapsed near the entrance, an old man, his clothes soaked, his face pale beneath the flickering light. People walked past him, some throwing quick, uneasy glances, others pretending not to see. Elena didn't hesitate. She rushed to him, kneeling in the puddles, her hands trembling slightly from the cold. "Sir, can you hear me?" she whispered, checking his pulse. Weak, but there. She called for help, and with the security guard's assistance, brought him inside. She wrapped him in a blanket, cleaned his bruised hands, and offered warm tea. The old man's eyes fluttered open, and for a fleeting second, gratitude shone through his pain. "You didn't have to," he murmured. Elena smiled faintly. "Yes, I did." She stayed with him until his breathing steadied, the rhythmic sound of the heart monitor echoing softly in the quiet room. Outside, thunder rolled, but inside, there was calm, the kind that only kindness creates. Just as Elena prepared to leave, she noticed a tall man standing at the far end of the corridor. His clothes were immaculate, a tailored suit, polished shoes, but his eyes told a different story. They were tired, almost empty. Their gazes met for a moment. He looked at her, then at the old man she had just saved. Something flickered across his face, a strange mix of surprise and recognition, as if he'd just witnessed something he hadn't believed existed anymore, genuine compassion. Before Elena could speak, he turned away and disappeared down the corridor, leaving behind only the echo of footsteps, and an unshakable feeling that this was not the last time their paths would cross. That night, the rain finally stopped. But for Elena, something had just begun. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the hospital windows, soft and golden after the long storm. Elena arrived early, her mind still replaying the image of the mysterious man from the night before. She didn't even know his name, yet something about the way he had looked at her, quiet, searching, lingered like an unanswered question. As she walked down the hall, a colleague hurried up to her, eyes wide. "Elena, the man from last night, he's here again. The millionaire, Alexander Korovin. He asked for you personally." Elena frowned in confusion. A millionaire. It didn't make sense. Why would a man like that want to see her? Still, curiosity, and a touch of nervousness, led her to his private room. When she entered, Alexander sat by the window, staring out at the courtyard. The early light caught the edge of his profile, making him look almost fragile despite his expensive suit. He turned as she approached, a faint, almost weary smile playing on his lips. "Good morning, Mr. Korovin," she said politely. "You wanted to see me." He studied her for a moment before speaking. "Yes, Miss Elena. I need your help, but not as a nurse." Her brows knitted. "I don't understand." He took a slow breath, then said quietly, "If anyone comes asking, reporters, business people, say that I'm your husband." For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Elena blinked, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" Alexander's voice was calm but carried an urgency that unsettled her. "Please, don't ask why, just trust me. It's important." Her instinct screamed to refuse, yet something in his tone, a deep sadness, a quiet desperation, made her hesitate. This wasn't arrogance or madness, it was pain speaking. Finally, she nodded slowly. "All right, I'll do it. But you owe me an explanation." He smiled faintly, relief softening his features. "And you'll have it, soon." As Elena left the room, her heart pounded. She didn't know what kind of storm she'd just stepped into, only that this man, this stranger, carried a secret powerful enough to change everything. By noon, the hospital no longer felt like the quiet place Elena knew. The once calm corridors buzzed with noise, hurried footsteps, camera flashes, and tense whispers. Word had spread fast. Alexander Korovin, one of the country's most powerful businessmen, was in this very hospital. Elena barely had time to breathe before the door to his room burst open. A crowd of reporters, lawyers, and executives flooded in, their voices sharp and demanding. "Mr. Korovin, is it true you faked your illness to avoid signing the merger? Are you hiding assets abroad? Is it true your company is collapsing?" Alexander sat on the edge of his bed, pale but composed. He said nothing. His eyes, however, searched for only one person, Elena. When she stepped inside, the noise died down for a moment. Her heart raced, but she remembered his request. Without hesitation, she walked over and placed a steady hand on his arm. "He's my husband," she said softly but firmly. "He's unwell. This interrogation is only worsening his condition. Please, have some humanity." A stunned silence followed. The reporters froze, their microphones half lowered. One woman scoffed, "Your husband? You expect us to believe that?" Elena met her gaze without flinching. "Believe what you want. But if you truly cared about the truth, you'd let him heal before tearing him apart." Her words, calm yet cutting, shifted something in the room. The arrogance melted from their faces, replaced by a discomfort none wanted to admit. One by one, they backed away, lowering their cameras. Within minutes, the crowd thinned, leaving only Elena and Alexander in the quiet that followed. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Alexander reached out, his hand trembling slightly. "You just saved my dignity," he whispered, his voice breaking. Elena smiled gently. "You don't owe me thanks, Mr. Korovin. You needed someone to believe you, even if only for a moment." He looked at her then, really looked, and something changed in his eyes. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper, something human that money could never buy. Outside, the flashes faded. Inside, something genuine began. The storm outside had passed, but the hospital room remained cloaked in a heavy stillness. The world beyond its walls carried on, the soft murmur of nurses, the distant echo of an intercom, yet inside, time felt suspended. Elena sat by Alexander's bedside, curiosity and quiet concern written across her face. He hadn't spoken since the reporters left. He only stared out the window, watching raindrops slide down the glass like silent tears. Finally, he broke the silence. "You must think I'm insane," he said quietly, his tone tinged with self-mockery. Elena shook her head. "No, but I do think you're hiding something. And I kept your secret, so, maybe you can trust me with the truth." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides pain. Then, taking a slow breath, he said, "I'm dying, Elena." The words hit her like a gust of cold wind. "What do you mean?" she whispered. "I have a rare heart condition," he explained. "Doctors say I may have months, maybe less if I don't slow down. But I've built an empire where weakness isn't allowed. My partners would destroy everything if they found out. So, I came here, not as a businessman, but as a man who wanted to see if kindness still existed." He looked at her, his eyes glistening. "I've spent years surrounded by people who smile only when they need something. When I saw you helping that old man, someone who had nothing to give you, it reminded me of what I've lost." Elena felt tears sting her eyes. For a moment, she saw past the millionaire, to a man terrified not of dying, but of dying unseen. "You wanted someone to see you as a person, not a name," she said softly. Alexander nodded. "And you did." For a long while, they sat in silence, no longer nurse and patient, but two souls who had found truth in vulnerability. Outside, the clouds began to break, and the first light of morning crept in, gentle, forgiving, and full of promise. Several weeks passed. The hospital corridors were once again calm, but for Elena, everything felt different. She still took her morning rounds, still greeted patients with her warm smile, yet something inside her had changed. Every time she passed the room where Alexander Korovin had once stayed, she felt a quiet ache, a mix of gratitude, sadness, and wonder. Then one afternoon, the head nurse rushed in with wide eyes. "Elena, turn on the television, quick." On the screen was a live press conference. Alexander Korovin stood at a podium, looking healthier, but his usual cold business expression had been replaced by warmth. Cameras flashed, and reporters crowded around him. "I called you here," Alexander began, his voice steady, "not to discuss my company or wealth, but to speak about something far more valuable." The room fell silent. He continued, "A few weeks ago, I came close to losing everything, not my business, but my faith in humanity. And then, in a small city hospital, I met a nurse who reminded me what compassion means. She didn't see a millionaire. She saw a man in need." Elena's hands trembled as she listened. Alexander smiled at the crowd. "Today, I'm announcing a donation to rebuild that hospital, to make it a place where no one is ever turned away. It will be called, Elena Hope Center. The reporters erupted in surprise. Cameras flashed brighter than ever. When one journalist asked, why her name? Alexander's gaze softened. Because once, when I was broken and afraid, she stood beside me and called me hers, not for fame or fortune, but for humanity itself. Alina's eyes filled with tears. She turned away from the screen, overcome by emotion. For the first time, she truly understood the ripple effect of a single act of kindness. Outside, the sun shone brighter than it had in weeks, spilling golden light across the city, a silent promise that goodness, once shared, never truly fades. It only grows, one heart at a time.